Welcome, everyone. It is the top of the hour, but people are actively joining. So we'll give it another 3 minutes before we get started. So for the next couple minutes, we'll be sitting here in silence, but we'll get started soon. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on how to use Weblate to contribute language translations of the ArchivesSpace application. I'm Jessica Crouch, the Community Engagement Lead for ArchivesSpace, and I'm joined today by ArchivesSpace Senior Program Manager Christine DeBella and ArchivesSpace Program Assistant Bailey Grace Harrell. We're delighted to have you with us for this webinar. This session is being recorded and will be made available on our YouTube channel and website soon. You'll notice your microphone and camera are muted. Please feel free to talk with fellow attendees via the chat, or if you have a question about the content of the webinar, please post those questions in the Q&A option. We'll be holding most questions until the end, and I'll read those questions in the Q&A during that time. In this webinar, I'll be providing an overview of how to use the open source web-based translation tool Weblate to contribute language translations of the ArchivesSpace application. Before I dive into how to use Weblate as a tool for providing translations, I wanted to give a general overview of the language options currently available in ArchivesSpace and how translations can be accomplished. ArchivesSpace currently has 5 available translations of the application. These translations are English, French, German, Japanese, and Spanish. These translations are available for both the staff user interface and the public user interface of ArchivesSpace. A user or archivist working in the staff user interface can select their preferred language through the Preferences section of the staff user interface. And on the public user interface, a user can select their preferred language through the language selection dropdown on the upper right-hand corner of the application. These translations apply to the field labels, the value lists, tooltips, and error messages within the ArchivesSpace application itself. ArchivesSpace does not automatically translate the content created with the application by a user. These 2 screenshots highlight the last point that I made. And when we're talking about translations of the application and when we're talking about using Weblate in this webinar, we're talking about translation of fields and content in the application itself. ArchivesSpace does not provide any sort of automatic translation of the data put into fields by a user. I'll talk a little at the end about how ArchivesSpace plans to better support multilingual description and other language support improvements in the application. But for the purposes of this webinar and in this discussion, we're talking about translation of the application itself. I know I've belabored the point, but this is a place where sometimes people can get confused. You can see in these 2 screenshots what I mean. Here, the user interface is available in English in the first screenshot at the top, and it's available in Spanish at the bottom. You see that the fields within the application are displayed in those languages, but the actual data for the resource record has not been manipulated. As with all facets of ArchivesSpace, ArchivesSpace accepts and encourages community contribution of translations of the application. That's how we have the translations that we have now. You can contribute translations to ArchivesSpace in two ways. For those that are comfortable working with GitHub or are looking to provide an entire translation of the application and kind of want to work independently that way, you can contribute a translation directly via GitHub. We have instructions available on our wiki on how to do that. But for those who are more comfortable working outside of GitHub or who would like to contribute to the ArchivesSpace translation project without committing to providing a full translation, ArchivesSpace uses an open source web-based translation tool called Weblate, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Regardless of how you choose to translate the application, whether through GitHub or Weblate, there are 5 files that need to be translated to provide a full translation of the application. These files are called public, common, enums, front-end, and front-end help. That's just what the files are called. We're going to be seeing them today, which is why I mention it now. If you elect to use GitHub to provide translations to the application directly, you would copy these files following the instructions provided in our wiki, make the translations, and then contribute them back via a pull request in GitHub. If you use Weblate, which I'm going to show you how to do now, you wouldn't need to download these files. They'd be made available to you in a user-friendly Weblate interface for your use. So it significantly simplifies the process. So what exactly is Weblate? Weblate is an open source web-based translation tool that enables a user to provide a translation of ArchivesSpace in real time, and it does not require the complete translation of the application to contribute. It doesn't require any work in GitHub. Through Weblate, users can collaboratively translate the application and contribute as much or as little as they want towards the translation, and as much or as little as their time or skill allow. We encourage anyone interested in language translation of the application to explore and consider using Weblate, especially if working in GitHub is a barrier. Weblate allows users to translate strings of text, which you're going to see, and offers a suite of tools and resources to make translation easier. I'm going to devote the rest of our time together going over how to access and use Weblate and provide some resources and tips to help you begin using Weblate. So first, if you would like to get started with Weblate, the first thing that you have to do is contact us at archivespacehome@lyrasis.org to request a user account. You'll need to provide us with your name and contact information, as well as let us know the language that you are interested in translating the application into. ArchivesSpace will create a user account for you, and we will provide a set of those blank files, those 5 files I mentioned, within Weblate for the translation you're interested in providing. You're about to see those files during the demo. Once you have your Weblate credentials and the language you're interested in translating is available in Weblate, you're ready to get started. So with that, I'm going to exit out of this slideshow and move into Weblate. All right, so I'm going to minimize some screens. So Bailey, Grace, and Christine, let me know if anything goes haywire because I can't see anything anymore. All right, so this is what Weblate looks like. When you get to Weblate, you're going to need to log in so that you can access the ArchivesSpace specific Weblate interface. I'm already logged in, but to do that, you would just go to the upper right-hand corner and select log in. Very familiar process if you've ever logged into anything, right? So once you're logged in, you will select this button that says Go Weblate because we're about to go Weblate. Once you're logged in, you are going to be presented with a dashboard that will be fairly specific to you. I'll talk about that in just a minute. But before I begin, I want to sort of make a or give you a bit of a warning. To avoid abuse of the application, Weblate rate limits certain behaviors in the application, including translating. But if you behave in a way that Weblate views as suspicious, and that usually means you're moving too quickly through the application, means that you're moving from one file to the other, and you're not pausing to really do anything, or if you're translating very quickly to the point that it doesn't think it's a human doing the translation, Weblate will log you out. For me, as I started learning about how to use Weblate and I was familiarizing myself with the application and getting more comfortable, it logged me out a few times just because I was moving too quickly because I was lost. So as you're learning how to use Weblate and you get logged out, it might be because of that. You just have to log back in and everything's okay. But I just wanted to give you that warning because I got logged out a few times. When you're logged in, like I said, you'll have an interface that looks very specific to you because I've been using Portuguese as an example as I've become more familiar with Weblate. This interface is showing me this is everything that you've been working in, which is Portuguese. Your interface will become specific to you as you're using Weblate. But when you first log in, you're going to need to actually navigate to the project where you want to start. So the way that you do that is you would go to Projects, ArchivesSpace Interfaces. All right. So from here, you're presented with those 5 files that I mentioned, as well as a glossary file. And if you want to view each individual file and the status of each individual file and all of the language that are available for that file, this is where you want to be. So I'll go ahead and click the public file. So from here, you can see all of the available languages that have either ArchivesSpace has either been translated into or are available for translation, and it's specific to the public file only. If you are interested in confirming that all languages for the public file have been completed, that would be a great way to find this information. But if you're looking to work more specifically with a one language for multiple files, there's an easier way to get there. So let's go back to Projects, ArchivesSpace Interfaces. Move over to the Languages tab. From here, you can see all of the available languages. Again, either ArchivesSpace has been translated into or are available for translation, and you can select the language you're interested in working in from here. For the purposes of this show and tell, we're going to be working in Portuguese. So you see, when you select the language that you're interested in using, you're given, again, all 5 of those files plus the glossary file. To have a complete translation of ArchivesSpace, all of these files need to be translated. So if you're hoping to do a total translation of the application into a certain language, you need to be prepared to commit to all of these files. But you don't have to start in one specific place. You can start wherever you want. All right, so what I'm going to do now, you can see I've been testing and learning. I've been using Portuguese, so I've already been working in the public file. I'm going to move down to the common file, which has had no translation, and we're going to use that for the majority of the show and tell. So you would select the file that you're interested in working in, and you're provided yet another dashboard by Weblate that is giving you specific information about this file. So the Portuguese translation of the common file and where the status is for that. There's been no translation done in this file, so it's a whole lot of 0% here. But as you begin to work through this process and come back to Weblate, maybe after stepping away, this dashboard can be more helpful because it can allow you to jump into certain areas of the translation that you might want to work in. That may not make any sense now, but I'm going to show you in a minute what the public file looks like as a work in progress, and that'll give you a better idea. Also from this dashboard, if you realize, oh, I'm in the wrong file, I don't want to be working in common, I want to be working in public, you can get to the appropriate file from there as well. But if you're just looking to translate, which is what we're here to do, right? The easiest way to navigate into this file and begin translating is to hit the black translate button. All right. So from here, you are actually where you'll be doing the work. This is where the translation happens. You see that the translation is provided for you here. You're provided with the string in English, and then your translation would be provided here. I'm going to talk about everything else on this screen before we get into how you actually save a translation, but that you're really doing the work here. I'm saying strings instead of words, even though this is just one word, because what Weblate provides you with is the specific strings of text throughout the application so that you can translate them within the appropriate context. So here, this is just one term, it's just the word suppressed, but there are other areas of the application where you see entire strings, or when you're talking about things like tooltips, there are full sentences that need to be translated. So you're translating the string of text and providing it with the appropriate context. You're not just translating individual words as you go, because ultimately that translation wouldn't make any sense by the end of it. So you're translating strings. In ArchivesSpace, sorry. We're in Weblate. Weblate provides you with information about how many strings you have left to translate. And since we haven't translated anything, there are a lot to be done here. But Weblate does provide the user with quite a few helpful tools to make translation easier and to provide you with that context as you're working to translate the application. There is a glossary to the right-hand side. This can be helpful, especially if you're working in a collaborative sort of environment. If you and maybe a few of your colleagues are looking to do the translation together, you can provide information here to help define the term and make decision-making easier in the future. You also can provide screenshots. So the string information, the screenshot context. If you wanted to take a screenshot from within the ArchivesSpace application and provide it here to help you and your colleagues translate it because you want to have that context of what it looks like in the application, you can do that. Weblate also provides a series of 5 tools or features below the area of translation. These tools can help you determine how to translate a string or term, but I would say they should not be relied upon to generate a translation without review and confirmation. And I'll explain a little bit more as we go through each one. But the first option is nearby strings. Nearby strings provides a user with context for the string being translated by displaying content in the strings immediately preceding or after the string within the ArchivesSpace application. So it may help you to gain a little bit of context about where this term or phrase is displaying in the application and what content is displaying in the file before or after it. So it's just good to help contextualize where this information is within ArchivesSpace. Similar keys may or may not be helpful. It provides users with examples of strings with similar characters. This one, I'll admit I haven't used very much. I haven't found it to be as helpful as some of the other tools, but it could be, again, in providing that context. Comments. It would be great if you're working, again, in a more collaborative environment and you want to leave some sort of note for other translators, a question, a comment, a rationalization for a decision that you made in the translation. You could do that there with the comments. Automatic suggestions is very helpful, but it is also the place where I would say you need to spend the most time confirming the information provided is relevant. It provides users with a suggested translation. This feature uses external translation tools, which are noted in the suggestion. You see the suggestion for this term is coming from Libre Translate. Sometimes they're from Google Translate. Sometimes there are multiple suggestions, and they do not always all match. So users should be mindful of the accuracy of these translations, especially within the context of ArchivesSpace, and you should really validate the suggestion before accepting it. I know that the impulse may be to just accept it because it looks good, but context definitely matters. You want to confirm the translation is accurate and it reflects the meaning of the word in ArchivesSpace. There are nuances to archival terminology and terms, especially within ArchivesSpace, that a generic translation tool just doesn't understand. So definitely take the time to confirm, if you do want to go with an automatic suggestion, that it is appropriate. Other languages, this shows you what this specific term has been translated into all of the other available languages in ArchivesSpace. So if you're translating into Portuguese and you're referring back to the English term, but you also speak French and you just want that additional context, this could be very helpful to you. I wish that was true for me. I wish I had language skills like that. But other languages, it shows you what the term has been translated into for all of the other available languages in the application. And then history shows you where the history of the translation. I've been testing and playing around with this, so you can see that there's some history here related to work that I have done. But as you're moving through translation, as translations may change or be updated over time, there's that history available. All right. So those are the tools that are available to you. Before I talk about how to save and move on, one other thing, you may be thinking that's too much. There's too much happening in this interface. I just want to translate the application into the language that I'm using. There is this little option called Zen mode. If you select that, it strips out all of the tools, all of that additional content, and it just provides you with terms that need to be translated. And so if you're really confident in ArchivesSpace and in the language that you're translating, you can just move straight through by using Zen mode, and it would be a great way to very quickly translate the application without having to move through all of those different tools and only being presented with one specific term at a time. So I'll just highlight Zen mode is there. It's called Zen mode, but it looks very stressful to me. But if you want to move through the translation at a quicker pace without all of the bells and whistles of Weblate, Zen mode is a good option. So finally, let's talk about the actual translation and saving the actual translation. So once you supply your term, which I'm going to do, you are ready to save and move on. There are 4 options available to you for saving or skipping. The first option is just skipping. This is if you do want to continue translating, you're not done with Weblate for the day, but you don't want to translate this term, you don't know how to translate this term, you want to spend a little more time researching, you can just skip, and it will move you to the next string in the file that needs to be translated. So skip is an option. It doesn't save any of your progress. It's just a way to move on to the next term in the file. Suggest is a bit of a random option. Suggest will provide you with a similar term to the term that's currently presented to you. If you want to translate something that is in a similar vein, but is not this specific term. But if you are ready to save your term and you want to do that, you have 2 options. The first option is save and continue. This is probably what you will use the most. This means I'm confident with this translation. I'd like to save this, and I'd like to be provided with the next string in the file. And you could just move through translation that way. Save and continue, save and continue. Save and stay means I want to save my work, but I don't want to move on to the next string. I'm done with this for the day. Just save my work and I'm done from here. But if you want to save your work, you would need to select one of these 2 options, save and continue or save and stay. I'm going to hit save and continue. And you see my work has been saved, and I'm presented with the next string in the file, which is the term deleted. And you can move through in this way. And it gives you little helpful, like I'm at string 2 out of over 1,700 for the common file in Portuguese. And you can move through the translation that way. Before we go back to the slides, I want to very briefly show you what an in progress file looks like. Let's go to our public file. All right. So this is the public file, which is a different file than what I was just showing you. I've been working in this file as I've been learning how to use Weblate. So this file has 20% translation already completed because that's what I've done. So as you're working through your translation, you'll start to see things like this. You'll start to see progress, right? You can do exactly what I did before with the common file. You can move straight into translation by hitting translate. But here the string statuses may be a little more beneficial for you. You may want to just move into untranslated strings. So you could select that and just translate those strings that have been untouched entirely, or things that maybe are failing their checks. You want to go through and clean that up. You could do that. And then again, you can move between your files if you wanted. I'm going to go ahead and just select translate again so you can see. If you just hit translate, you're going to be presented with content that needs translation or needs editing. Here you can see that this is a phrase that has already been translated, but it's marked as needing editing. Within Weblate, something could be marked as needing editing one of 2 ways. One, a person can manually check that box. So if you're working again in a collaborative environment and someone wants another set of eyes on their translation, they can mark that. If you select that, that doesn't necessarily mean that anyone on the program team is going to be checking this work. And it also does not prevent this translation from being saved and sent to the ArchivesSpace application. It just means that this may need some review. Another way that string can be marked as needing editing is Weblate will do it automatically if a change has happened to the file. And since ArchivesSpace is a very active application and there are a lot of edits being made and development being done to ArchivesSpace, very frequently these files will be changed. That does not mean that the actual content of these strings has changed at all. And it doesn't even necessarily mean that this needs any sort of manipulation or change. It's just Weblate saying, hey, something has happened to this file since the last time this translation happened. Does this need to be checked? May or may not be super helpful. So whenever you're working in a file that has already had translation done to it, and you're really looking to translate a specific type of content, most likely untranslated content, you can always use the filters to move around again within. So here I only want to be working with untranslated strings. So once I told Weblate that, I now only have 295 strings that I need to work with, which still sounds like a lot, but it's fewer than 1,700. So that you can use filtering to get into the specific content that you're interested in translating as well. And you can always keep track of your progress as well as all of the other available languages by going into the ArchivesSpace Interfaces project. So that's how you use and manipulate Weblate. I'm going to go back into my slides now. Where were we? All right. So a few considerations using Weblate and providing translations more broadly. The Weblate application contributes your translations back to the ArchivesSpace GitHub as pull requests within 72 hours after you save them, or in 72 hours, I should say, after you save them. You do not have to do anything. You don't have to interact with GitHub. This is an automatic process, and this way you know that your work has been saved to the ArchivesSpace project. If you realize that your translation is inaccurate or you want to change it, you can always do that within Weblate, and the change will be pushed as a pull request as well. That nothing you do can't be undone. But within 72 hours, Weblate will contribute your translation back to GitHub. As you're providing translations, just a few things to keep in mind. Understand the ArchivesSpace specific definition of the words you're translating and make sure that you're consistent in how you apply that. Terms used within ArchivesSpace may have a different meaning in the context of the application than in the literal translation of the word. For example, archival object records within a resource record have what's described as a parent, child, and sibling relationship to one another. And that's terminology that implies a level of hierarchy for each component record, not a literal familial relationship. So be mindful that there could be better terms to represent that contextual meaning than ones that are direct translations in another language. Be consistent in your word choice. If you determine an appropriate translation for an archival or ArchivesSpace specific term, be mindful that this term is likely to be repeated throughout the application, so be consistent in how you apply that translation. Be mindful of punctuation and capitalization within a string. That should be respected within the translation. And if you are working and you have a question about a translation or you would like assistance translating a term or string, reach out to the community. ArchivesSpace members are strongly encouraged to collaborate with one another via our listservs, and you can learn about how to sign up for our listservs on our website. And then SAA does maintain a data dictionary that's very helpful. It's a great resource to help you define archival terminology. Not all archive-specific terminology is going to be represented, and that's where you could fall back on the listserv, but it is good to help define specific archival terms. All right. And on this slide, I've linked several resources to amplify the content in this webinar and to help you get started with Weblate. All of this content, all of these slides will be included with the recording when the recording is made available online. In addition to those helpful resources, I've also linked something to our ArchivesSpace Multilingual Description Task Force. As I mentioned at the beginning, this initiative to facilitate easier translation of the application is part of a wider initiative by the ArchivesSpace program team to provide better language support in the application. In addition to providing a better mechanism for translation in the interfaces, ArchivesSpace is currently working to enable multilingual description within the application, and we've established an ArchivesSpace Language Support Task Force. It's comprised of team members, program team members, and community members. This task force is a result of ArchivesSpace's commitment to increased accessibility and usability of the application, and it's based on feedback from the ArchivesSpace member community that was gathered by the ArchivesSpace usability subteam. This working group's mission is to identify needed improvements to language support within the ArchivesSpace application, develop use cases specific to those needs, and develop feature requests for the ArchivesSpace application to improve language support. So if you're interested in learning more about that work, I've linked the wiki pages for that there. And you're always welcome to reach out if you have any questions about that. So in addition to that information, like I said, I linked the relevant documentation to our Weblate documentation, as well as more information about how to contribute language translations, not just via Weblate, but if you're more comfortable working in GitHub, how to do that via GitHub as well. And then I've also linked Weblate's user documentation, which I have found very helpful. Their user documentation is very good and very easy to navigate when you're using Weblate. Yeah, and then lastly, feel free to get in touch. If you have any questions about what we've covered in this webinar, if you're interested in getting started with Weblate, or just have any other questions about language support in general, please feel free to reach out to us via the email address linked there. So with that, I'm going to stop, and I can see things popping up in the chat. I haven't looked at them, but we're going to go ahead and move over into Q&A. I will say that I am learning how to use Weblate as we're working through this process, so I may not be able to answer every question, but I can certainly get back to you with answers later. So let's go ahead and move into the Q&A. All right, Michael, on the slide demonstrating the PUI headers versus notes and archivist provided content and how the latter are not translated. The Spanish example still has fetches for dates. So system provided description headers are translated. Yeah, so any of those, like the fields, the labels, the tooltips, anything that is a system provided or ArchivesSpace specific term, those are translated. It's the data that you put into the field as a user that is not translated. I'm not sure if I am answering your question.
And I'll just like pop in for a second. This is Christine, the program manager. Something to keep in mind too is even with the things that are translated through this process, the translation is only as good or as complete as what's provided by the user who's doing the translating. So sometimes you may find things where there's a mix between English and a different language. And sometimes that's because there wasn't a translation provided for one specific label or a part of a label. So that might have been what was happening on that slide.
Thanks, Christine. Renee, I see you have two questions. One is, how can I add a new language? You would like to translate ArchivesSpace to Dutch. If you're interested in adding a new language, you would just contact us at archivespacehome@lyrasis.org. Let us know that you are interested in providing a Dutch translation. We'll get those files added for you and get an account created for you in Weblate to use Weblate. And then I also noticed you asked, are there any other users who might want to contribute translating a Dutch or participating in a Dutch translation? So I would definitely encourage you to reach out to the listserv about that to see if there are other users. I know we've heard before about interest in a Dutch translation. So reach out to us if you would like an account in Weblate, and we can get that started for you. And yeah, for sure, reach out to the community to see if there is some community collaboration that can happen around that. And then Linda asks, we wouldn't have anyone on staff to do translation, so we would have to contract someone. We might be able to get a grant for that. How might we estimate how many hours this could take? That's a good question. I don't know the answer off. I don't know for sure how long it would take. We have had a community member contribute a translation of German via Weblate. We may be able to get some data based off of that, as well as other sort of anecdotal data. Christine, I'm not sure if you have any comment for that. But Linda, definitely reach out to us because we can maybe help provide some more background information. All right. I'm catching up on the chat right now, but if there's any other questions, please do drop them into the Q&A. Not seeing any other questions. So I don't want to. Oh, okay, now there are questions. See, as soon as I say those things, then questions happen. Michael asked, would it make sense to perhaps only translate the PUI but not the backend? That's an interesting question. I think that it depends on, I'm sure a full translation of the application would definitely be appreciated, but if there is an interest in starting in a certain place within translation, I think that that is a conversation that can be had. It might be a question to ask the listserv again, like Renee's question about finding a group of people who might want to collaborate together. And if some people have a specific investment in the PUI being translated as opposed to the staff user interface, but ultimately the result is an entire translation is provided, that is a possibility.
And I'll say, I think there very well could be a good reason, you know, and a often used reason to do that. It depends on kind of who's on your staff, who's using the staff side of your application, you know, how much you know, like it's really only going to be people working in this specific language or these few languages versus the user community that you support and serve, who may work in many different languages, and you know that you want to support them in that. So I could definitely see lots of good reasons to do that. Something to keep in mind with that is there may be some translations that you would also need to provide in the common file, not just in the public file, to get kind of a complete translation of everything in the public interface. But most of the things that you would need to do would be in that public file for sure.
Thanks. Lynn, I see your question, but Michael's followed up. Is there somewhere this can be discussed if I'm not on the listserv, not with a member institution? Feel free to email us at our email address. There is a Google group that's called non-member ArchivesSpace that's open to anyone using ArchivesSpace, not just member organizations. So you could potentially post that there to see if there's any discussion, or you could, again, like I said, reach out to us directly and we'd be happy to talk about it. Right. And then Lynn asked, if you request to translate a language that's already been worked on, will you be given a file with the work in place? Absolutely. So if you're interested, for example, if you would like to pick up where I left off with Portuguese, you would just be provided an account in Weblate and you'd be able to work directly in the files that I've already worked on. So you would be provided with a set of files that everyone will be working on collaboratively. It'd be one set of files for a language. So yeah, you definitely don't have to redo work that's already been done. All right. Any other questions? Not seeing any. Oh, and none popped up. Normally when I say that, one will pop up. Okay, so if we don't have any other questions, we can go ahead and wrap, but I am going to speak very slowly. So if you are typing, please do post that question. Don't feel like you can't. But if something comes to mind later, oh, Renee, you got me. What what if an institution as an institution use a specific term for something that isn't commonly used? That's a great question. I definitely would encourage in a translation using the more broadly accepted archival terminology. And I think especially in something like the tooltips, where the tooltips can get very institutionally specific, I could see where what you're asking would be a problem. But we definitely want to keep away from specific institutional practice or institutional definitions in the wider community translation. This would also be a great way to work collaboratively again with the listserv. So reaching out to users on the listserv to see how they define the term and if there's a place to find common ground there. That's a really good question.
And something to keep in mind is doing a translation that's kind of becomes part of ArchivesSpace and is available to the whole community, doesn't prevent you from also doing a local translation for yourself and kind of customizing the language that's used, especially in your tooltips, but it could be in other places too. For your own archive space, you still would have you would still have access to all the ways that you can customize your own archive space. This is just a great way to collaborate with others and make that hard work available to other members of the community that would benefit.
All right. I'm pausing for more questions. But like I said, if anyone has any questions that come to them later, if they want to talk about anything in specific in more detail, please feel free to email us on at our email address, archivespacehome@lyrasis.org. We'd be happy to talk about it. And again, if you're interested in working collaboratively with a group or maybe finding people who are interested in working on a translation together, do reach out via our listserv. We would be happy to create Weblate accounts for people who are looking to explore and hoping to contribute that way. It is a very simple tool to use. I will say that as a person who, had no experience with Weblate before this and frankly only speaks one language. It's a very user-friendly, very easy tool. Didn't require any interaction with GitHub, which is another thing that I liked. So I highly encourage exploring this if translating the application is something that's of interest to you. And the little progress bars and things almost made it like a game. So if you're the kind of person who likes that sort of thing like I do, it made it kind of like a game. So yeah, thank you all for attending. I'm not seeing any other questions popping up in the chat, so we will go ahead and wrap up, but do reach out to us with any questions or any follow-up. And I thank you all for your interest in this, and I look forward to seeing you at the next ArchivesSpace event. Thanks, everybody.